Welcome everyone to weekly Metagov seminar. My name is Val. I take she or they pronouns, and I'm one of two Metagov community leads. Senti here with me as well. And today I'm excited to be introducing our speaker for today's session. So today we have Anke Liu, who's going to be joining us, or who is here to talk about Neural Quorum Governance. And so I could give you more information, but I'm going to let Anke take it away and start her presentation. So welcome. Thank you all for being here, and let's enjoy. We'll have about 15-ish minutes, 20 maybe, of presentation, and then we'll do the rest Q&A and discussion. So buckle up, exciting stuff. Let's get into it.
I gotta unmute in order to say some things. Yeah, I might actually like do a little bit more presentation, but anyone is actually able to ask any questions at any time. I'll try to keep a good eye on the chat. So it's a little bit of a meaty topic. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to just send something in a chat or just unmute yourself, and I'm happy to kind of answer on the spot. So don't feel shy. Great, I'll get started. Well, thanks so much, Sent and Val, for that awesome introduction. Excited to see so many folks, people I know, but also some new folks here. So definitely don't be shy to ask questions. My name is Anke Liu. I'm the Ecosystem Growth Lead at the Stellar Development Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that supports development and growth of Stellar. At the foundation, I lead our ecosystem growth team, which manages the Stellar Community Fund, which is actually the first use case that is implemented Neural Quorum Governance. So Neural Quorum Governance, in short, it's aimed to set a new governance standard that prioritizes community alignment, participation, adaptability, and aims to effectively address common, hard-to-solve issues in that Web3 and beyond mechanisms are experiencing. So today, I'd like to take you on a bit of a journey. So I'll start a bit with the overall introduction to Stellar and the Stellar Community Fund, followed by an understanding of the entire design process and reasoning behind creating the mechanism. Then we'll dive a bit into what the definition is of Neural Quorum Governance and how the mechanism works and how it's also implemented in the Community Fund. And finally, dive into some of our learnings and next steps and how you can get involved. All right, let's start with the basics. So is anyone here familiar with Stellar by chance? Some people. All right, well, I'll go over it briefly. So Stellar is an open source, decentralized layer 1 blockchain network. It's been around since 2015, actually before Ethereum, and it's specifically designed to power applications and services, creating equitable access to the global financial system. Stellar provides infrastructure developers can use to issue assets, build applications, and deploy decentralized financial protocols. Developers can choose to either build with a dedicated set of functions available by SDKs in several languages, or we now also have a native Rust-based smart contracts platform, both which allow direct access to the Stellar network. So I haven't updated these operations from these stats from last year, so pardon, they are a lot higher now. But it's pretty powerful, right? Since apps can actually tap into the Stellar extensive on and off ramp provider network to get access to the world's currency. So for instance, Stellar is actually the largest cash out provider network through a collaboration with MoneyGram, which Stellar apps can integrate with to offer end-to-end solutions to real world problems. All right, so that was a little bit about Stellar. Now let's switch to the Community Fund, which actually powers more of the ecosystem growth side of the Stellar ecosystem. Neural Quorum Governance has also been first implemented in the Stellar Community Fund, and this is a fast-paced award program that leverages community input to fund and support teams building on Stellar, from ideation to successful launch and growth. We've the fund has been launched in 2019, so it's been around for a while and awarded over $31 million in excellent to over 400 projects. Most of these funds have actually been distributed since Neural Quorum Governance was added to the stack. We have a number, SCF actually a number of project types. So we have financial protocols, education community, infrastructure services, developer tools, and applications. So anything that an ecosystem is necessary to grow. It's also got a vibrant community that votes to determine award allocation, supports projects, and participates in SCF's governance to make sure it meets the ecosystem needs. You can see a few of the tiers here. I will mention them later when I actually talk about our implementation. All right, well, let's actually dive into some of the design journey. SCF has been active, as I mentioned, like for 5 years now. And in those 5 years, we've really gotten a lot of community input and also like shifting ecosystem needs, a lot of feedback and trying to like navigate the issues that are associated with effective award allocation by community input. And so last year, we collaborated with BlockScience to, I believe everyone here should probably be introduced to BlockScience already, but they are kind of a firm that really like does a lot of research to solve complex issues. And we've collaborated with them to design a governance framework that would answer to not only some of the issues experienced with the community fund, but also in the broader Web3 governance space. And some of these like common issues, they include like inaccurate community sentiment. What we see also is a lot of like centralization and collusion, especially by whales, if there's token-based governance involved. Voter fatigue and apathy are still really large kind of issues in Web3 governance, as well as Sybil attacks and manipulation. We have the low information voter problem as well, and as well as a lack of scalability and adaptability. Oh, Brian, are you not able to see my screen?
I'm sorry, I can. I don't know why it wasn't showing me your screen, but now I see it. So my apologies for that message.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, I was like, oh, got a little heart attack there because I thought that people weren't able to see on my screen and just looked at my face while I was presenting. Great. Well, good thing that the screen is now is showing for you as well. So kind of going back from, I guess, the common problems that we experienced, we started to like map out kind of the system's requirements and also desirables. BlockScience actually uses this following like 3-phased process to design solutions for complex problems, starting with the desirables mapping, followed by the specification, design, and integration of it, and finally the validation of the system by thoroughly testing it and simulating its performance. Starting with phase 1, we've really analyzed kind of following like desirables of how we wanted funding allocation and governance to look like in SCF. Like it should be effective in determining projects that should receive funding. It should also be fair and reflect community sentiment, reward beneficial behavior. It has to be scalable to avoid overwhelming voters, transparent in a way that the information is publicly available, but also remain individual privacy, which are 2 very difficult things to combine. I will explain more about that later in the presentation. But the system should be flexible and to be able to adapt. So in the 5 years that SCF has been around, like we have changed the mechanism a lot, and each time we have to kind of update it in order to reflect the current kind of community feedback and ecosystem needs. And finally, we also wanted this mechanism to be a bit innovative and also use Stellar's technical capabilities wherever possible. This is how I'm able to fund the research. So while exploring some of the different types of like voting mechanisms across the space, we found that most governance mechanisms, whether it's Web3 or not, rely on either direct or representative governance. And most of them are weighted by token-based governance, which are by nature introduce some of the undesired issues that I mentioned before. And as a Stellar community, like it's primarily actually not a token-based community. And also we had the desire to keep the governance process semi-open rather than totally open or totally closed. We divided kind of we actually dived into 2 areas of interest. One is reputation-based governance and liquid democracy. So I'll start with the first. For anyone who is familiar with reputation-based governance, it involves evaluating one's trustworthiness, expertise, contribution history, and also alignment with the initiative's value to influence voting power and assign membership. So the reputation-based governance could actually lead to like more informed decision making as there's more voting power to experts. It could also be more inclusive as the governance doesn't need to be limited to token holders or validated, but could include a plethora of different user types. It could drive intrinsic motivation rather than often misaligned extrinsic motives such as monetary gain. And another Another benefit is that it's quite versatile and can be layered with other mechanisms as well as being kind of like intuitive. We kind of make choices based on reputation in our everyday lives without even realizing it. It's definitely like challenging to translate this intuitive process that we use every day in our brains to actually in a kind of smart contract based governance system. So it requires juggling many factors, might be overwhelmingly complex. And another issue is that we have to be wary of the influence of certain members who've accrued reputation from the start, so that they don't remain dominant and unchallenged over time. So another area of interest was the liquid democracy. So instead of like having either direct democracy, direct voting or representative voting, you actually have a combination of the two to offer like the best of both worlds, where people can either choose whether they like to vote directly or delegate their votes. So as voters are able to delegate to experts, it can also lead to more informed decision making. Also leads to more like inclusivity by flexible participation based on like availability, expertise, and interest into a particular issue. There's also an availability to redelegate or in some cases override the delegates' votes, which hold delegates accountable. I'll dive a bit quicker because I see that I am talking for quite a while. So let's actually dive into then how we arrived at Neural Quorum Governance. So out of these design processes with BlockScience came Neural Quorum Governance, or NQG for short. It takes after a form of liquid democracy, combining both modular voting power attribution, neural governance, with opt-in delegation of voting power to trusted groups, quorum delegation. As an open source framework, anyone can use it to design governance systems that prioritize community alignment, participation, and adaptability. So it offers also more sophisticated alternatives to token-based governance and has the ability to measure things like reputation, expertise, and trust, rather than simply relying on token holdings. With NQG, we really wanted to create a governance system that resonated with Stellar's ethos of creating equitable access to the global financial system, where someone didn't need to buy their way in or be one of the early adopters, or always have the time to contribute. So yeah, at the end of the day, like the main goal of any governance system is to get ample and diverse participation for effective decision making. And NQG offers customizable design where members can work their way up, gain trust, or also a reputation in the ecosystem to have more influence in decision making with flexible options for participation. So let's dive into the individual pieces of it a little bit. And again, like feel free to like pause if you have any questions at any time. So neural governance, which is like one of the pieces of Neural Quorum Governance, is the modular kind of transparent, flexible architecture for defining one's voting power. And this is inspired by neural networks, as the system mimics our brain kind of information processes through interconnected voting neurons. More of a simplified version of that, but that's the idea. Each of these voting neurons consists of both an oracle function and a weighting function. The first one encodes the core logic of data input, and the second one encodes how it should be weighted. So these outputs from these voting neurons can be aggregated together in layers and then also pass as input to the next layer until a final value is reached. Some of the kind of benefits of neural governance are that it can simplify the structures of evaluations of reputations, break down this intricate process into smaller, more manageable parts, and offer kind of a plug and play experience for adaptive governance. It can also be used to have more inclusive participation in governance, as it can also be used to determine membership. In terms of like neurons, there's a lot of different types, and depending on like if you're doing an on-chain or an off-chain reputation weighting, anything from like expertise or trust or even like token holdings, anything can kind of be added as a neuron basically. Then quorum delegation is also like, is one of the more interesting parts in my opinion, is like the neural governance is kind of also based on some of the other types of oracle weighting functions. With quorum delegation, it allows users to passively vote. Oh, Lydia, I see that you have a question. What model of reputation do you use? I'm going to actually go into that in the implementation section. So wait just a few minutes. As far as quorum delegation, it allows users to passively vote by delegating their voting power to a quorum or group of other users. It's inspired with the Stellar Consensus Protocol, which is a proof of agreement type of consensus mechanisms, where validators actually define their trusted quorum of other validators in order to validate a transaction on the network. So Stellar's consensus protocol, consensus mechanism is based on trust rather than proof of work or proof of stake. And that it's kind of mimicked by this mechanism of quorum delegation. So voting power actually goes to the majority's decision or whatever kind of quorum, minimum quorum that you have set of the chosen delegates, but can be changed each voting round. And you can also choose delegate per decision. So it's quite modular in terms of the implementation here. Without having to kind of reveal information about the quorum, the user can automatically vote. So this can also reduce attention costs for users while still allowing high flexibility and privacy. Those were very important parts as we designed this mechanism for the Stellar Community Fund. Also, as these quorums are self-selected and can be altered with each decision or topic, it could avoid potential collusion issues that you see with other mechanisms. And as quorum results are determined from the consensus of a self-selected group of voters they trust, it allows for a bit of a buffer to protect against non-voting or rogue voters. All right, so some of the use cases of kind of like a Neural Quorum Governance can include like public goods funding allocation, as NQG has the ability to incorporate evaluation criteria beyond profit potential, such as prior network participation or voting history. It can allow the community to easily adjust the weights in those signals. It also has domain expertise representation to improve maybe the quality or like kind of like the reviews of the voting, as well as allowing for adaptive governance. Actually, in several different ways where neural governance can actually accept inputs at each layer, transforming them in weighted outputs of the next layer, and this allows for cross-round adaptations. It can also like take in results of prior voting actions, such as project success and outcomes, to be an important signal for future voting power allocation, something that we're very interested in exploring and integrating into the Stellar Community Fund. So where can you find all of this information? Because obviously maybe I just talked for a lot and it kind of all goes one ear in, one ear out. We actually have something called the Governance Module Library that contain the specification, implementation, also tuning guides and simulations of neural governance and quorum delegation. This is created by BlockScience and defines all the requirements and inputs and outputs. Probably like hover over this quickly. It's just if you go into, I'll just message it in the chat here. It's the and it has all the different kind of specifications, as you can see here. All right, I won't go into too much depth because I want to finish at some point today. Then also like you can it takes quite a bit of time and effort to set up some of these systems, like to figure out like, well, what are some of the neurons that you'd like to create, figure out the weighting, figure out the parameters on those systems. That's the one thing with Neural Quorum Governance. It can be a bit more complex. So to help anyone else with experimenting with the system, like BlockScience also created an open source tool called CAD for anyone to do research and simulate different outcomes and counterfactual analysis, sanity checking on the simulations. And these implementations are readily available today. If you go to, this is the other one. Okay, yeah, BlockScience here. This is the repo where kind of all of the CAD demo is, and also like some instructions on how you can get it up and running. And these instructions can also be found in the governance modules library. So yeah, it allows you for doing a number of different things and simulating. And I'll go into like what our pilot implementation has done in a bit. So Lydia, I'll get to your question. So yeah, Neural Quorum Governance has been first implemented in the Stellar Community Fund, which I shared earlier. Little bit on the roadmap of things. We have started early 2023 last year, and like this year we have been really focused on simulating and calibrating, also like deploying to mainnet and getting the contract live and getting the contracts also on open sourced, and later this year, I think where the timeline has a bit shifted since we have been working on the actual award structure a bit more instead of the Neural Quorum Governance, but the later this year we'll focus a lot more on ecosystem collaboration and trying to support any other implementations with getting used to the mechanism. So a little bit of an overview here of what the pilot implementation included. So the NQG's implementation of SCF was done through Stellar smart contracts. There's actually an open source repo if anyone is interested in exploring more. Basically, to balance the user kind of privacy, transparency, and also computational efficiency within the current constraints of our smart contract system, we currently have employed a hybrid model. And for the hybrid computational model, and currently the contract actually aggregates results from each neuron to a certain the final voting power for submissions, where computations are performed partly off-chain, and the results are uploaded to the contractor by an admin. It's not an ideal solution as we have it right now, but we hope with the coming of ZK features to Stellar smart contracts that we can have a fully verifiable and also a system that actually still provides the voter privacy that the community has expressed to require. So if you're interested in kind of diving in deeper, this is a really great blog that I wrote that kind of goes into how the votes are uploaded on the on-chain contract, how then the delegations work. Delegations are currently resolved on-chain because we are actually connecting the Discord username, so that's the identifiable part of a user, to the public keys on Stellar, which are then publicly viewable. So the connection between those two should remain private, and right now that's the only way to do it, was to keep it off-chain. And similar with the neurons, all the details on the contract, how we share it, has been there. But yeah, okay, Eugene, I see that. I will answer it later. And then also you can see some of the insights from building on the new smart contract system, and then some of the issues that we ran into building it on it to actually be able to protect further privacy, enable delegation reputation, and allow trustless verification. To have the ideal version, we might need a more of a ZK implementation. But let me go back to some of the other implementation details. So as I mentioned, as the community is mainly based on merit and reputation rather than token holdings, our initial choice of neurons included number of users that trusted the voter, also voter history and Discord tiers. So these are relatively minimum, kind of like neurons. We are actually there's a company called a project called Trustful, I think by Danny, and who is currently working actually on an expertise neuron based on some of the Stellar badges that people can earn as they complete exciting challenges on the Stellar network. And so I'm very excited to see that happening. Currently, we just have these three. These neurons were relatively low weighted to keep the results in control. So individuals couldn't have more than 2 or 10 times the voting power of others. Okay, next slide. Also, the current minimum quorum that we required was 3 active users. We actually loosened this from some of the initial settings to prevent delegate votes from resulting in abstain. So you can see in one of the recent rounds, we actually realized that 30% of the votes were delegated, right? Of which about 40% of the votes resulted in abstain, as the minimum quorum could not be made. And so this is why also the minimum quorum was loosened. But we realized that this was also not enough. So in the next system, we are introducing category specific delegate panels, which actually allows kind of the nomination of these delegates. And so if people nominate to be a delegate, they're still well, I am definitely going to be available for these 3 rounds. And so people can then select their quorums from the nominated delegates, which will help us a lot in setting up and making sure that the people who have been delegated to, that those go through and don't resolve in abstain. Also, I think maybe some of the interesting learnings here were that the NQG kind of the outcome didn't change the clear yes or no votes, as opposed to like one person, one vote. You can kind of see in this example of the two award rounds, where you can see here where it's just NQG outcome, and then there's one person, one vote. But it did actually offer some alternatives to the gray areas, the maybes. And so after each round, like the kind of the voters and the verified members, we always discuss the voting outcomes before we decide on final award allocation to prevent anything like uncertain from happening that people didn't like realize before, that was like not captured. And so far, the NQG kind of Neural Quorum Governance outcome has consistently been favored by the community. And so these individual findings may suggest that this type of governance may perform better in gray area decision making, but further research is needed to prove this out. Yeah, as I mentioned, we also were able to, because SCF leverages criteria-based tiers pretty heavily in governance, as I shared earlier. These offer the availability, especially the higher two tiers, you can either vote actively or you can delegate for your votes. Then we also have added kind of a lower tier that was like more like easily attainable, that they're only able to delegate, and actually this allowed us to double the voter count without negative impact on the outcome. So some of the future features will include dynamic voting power based on like logistical curve rather than linear. Right now, like someone is able to kind of like, if they just like, let's say, vote more often, or if they get more people to trust them, like their voting power just goes up in a linear curve. We actually want this to look much more like a logistical curve, so that like new members to the ecosystem, like once they kind of reach a certain inflection point, have like a more or less a consistent, I guess, like voting power as some of the longer term members. And this is to kind of include, offer more inclusive kind of governance. We also want to add the ability to override some of the quorum results, and that this would make it like a true like liquid democracy type of system, where you can, let's say you'll be for a round, you'll be like, okay, I'm going to delegate my votes now. This is my quorum for, let's say, financial protocols, this is my quorum for applications, blah, blah, blah. And then actually you realize that later on, like, oh, so these were the results from these different quorums that I selected. And actually, like, I don't agree with those results. So you could actually like choose to overwrite them. And so that would be the ability to override.
That is the most essential function of liquid democracy that exists.
Yes, exactly. So sorry, I was like a little bit shaken when you said that, because like I was just like going on in my brain, and then like I heard someone say something. So yeah, thank you for bringing that in. Exactly, right? And so like so ideally, like this is the system that should be in place for liquid democracy to actually be added to like some system like this. Then also,
sorry, can you share the link
yes.
to your presentation so we can kind of follow along? I would love to bounce back now that you've kind of gone into more the implementation. I want to now bounce back to the beginning of the presentation and kind of get my full head around everything. But yeah, folks, please feel free to keep sharing questions in the chat. And yeah, there's no such thing as a dumb question. I have lots of dumb questions coming to mind. So feel free to ask whatever is on your mind. I'll let Anke finish though, so we can move to the Q&A. But how much longer do you think, Anke? Do you want to present?
2 minutes? Yeah.
Cool. All right, get ready. Let's move to discussion in 2 minutes.
All right, cool. So yeah, some of the also experimenting with additional neuron weighting and additional neurons, as well as enhancing some of the verifiability and transparency in the system, as I mentioned earlier. Great. So like we recommend folks to get involved. You can learn more in the SCF handbook, which is kind of like our like overall official rules, guidelines about everything about the fund, as well as kind of, if you look here, I have a specific area about Neural Quorum Governance that kind of sums everything up, and also links to the blogs and updates, and also reports. You can, for instance, go into one of the voting reports that I shared earlier, as well as updates. Then also we recommend people to contribute to the governance models library. There is it's an open source. So if you actually go to governance, GitHub governance, I'm sure I have it somewhere here. Okay, well, I'll find the exact like GitHub link. It should be somewhere in the in kind of this module overview, but I'll find it and then add it here in the chat. But we recommend to like add more kind of like features and also like different types. It doesn't need to be, so this is definitely not Stellar specific. This is kind of like overall trying to add new implementations to Neural Quorum Governance and even some other mechanisms as well. If folks are interested in getting involved, we encourage you to become verified. You can become verified on if you go to our site, and then learn more. And then, if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. I'm also on the Metagov Slack. I'm on Telegram, Twitter, and here are also some other links to dive more deeper into. Cool. Well, thanks so much. It was a bit long. So thank you again for your patience, and happy to answer any questions now.
Cool, let's do it. And yeah, if you don't mind sending the link to the presentation in the chat, that'd be great.
Yes. Let's see.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had Lydia ask her question about what model of reputation. Lydia, do you feel like you got your question answered? Do you want Anke to go any more into the reputation side of things?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can, it's mainly just, I guess right now we have 3 neurons. So I think if also you will be able to view it in the contracts section as well. If you dive into our, kind of like the assigned reputation neuron, we have the prior history and also like the trust graph neuron. And then also some of these details can be found in the governance modules library as well, especially like on the trust graph bonus, which was actually added as a separate module.
So those are kind of the 3 models of reputation, you would say. Can you go over them again? The trust graph. What was the other?
Here we go. Like, so we have assigned reputation. So this actually takes based on like the tiers, right? And so if you could like look at, let me see if I can go this one. We actually have like 4 different tiers right now, and 3 that are able to participate in some kind of voting or delegation. So if you have like, for instance, like Pathfinder, that's like our lowest one, you can attain the Pathfinder role by gaining expertise. So there's actually an automated role. We have something called Stellar Quest, where you can complete challenges on the Stellar network, and it proves that you have somewhat of a Stellar expertise. And so once you've kind of like proven that, you can get the Pathfinder role and you can start to delegate your votes. And so that also like gives you a bit of voting power as well that you can then attach to your delegate vote. But then Navigator and Pilot, that's where things really start to kind of get interesting. These 2 roles are currently voted in by other navigators, and there's also an automated process that happens on our Discord. And so navigators are able to like both delegate, but also actually vote directly to allocate awards. And then the pilots are able to now become delegates. That, let's say, other Pathfinders or Navigator, or even pilots could delegate to, in the case that either they don't have the role like Pathfinder does, or they don't have the availability or expertise, or maybe they have bias and they feel like, actually, I don't feel comfortable voting directly for this project now.
So navigators and pilots are both voted in?
What did you say?
Navigators and pilots are both voted roles, like people are elected to those roles?
That's correct. Yes. They have to like meet, I guess, like someone can nominate them, and then they have to kind of get 3 for navigator, they have to get at least like I think like 5 delegated or navigators to like say like, okay, yes, I think this has been a good delegation. And for pilot, there's also like voting history kind of involved as well.
Cool. So
but yeah, it's
rules, and then the trust graph is different.
Yes. Yeah, so there's a prior history voting, like a history neuron is basically on how many times have you voted historically. Like the more times, right now, like how it goes, it's like linear voting attribution, which is not ideal, but it's like the more times that you have voted historically, like the higher that particular kind of neuron weighting score is. And then the last one is trust graph neuron, which is a bit different than the delegates. It was designed for to mimic trust, and I think maybe like the Neural Quorum Governance might have some more. Let me see if I can find here. No, this is trust graph. So yeah, I mean, that doesn't really say that much, but the idea is that I use like a PageRank algorithm from Google, where like you can then select as a user, you can select, oh, I trust, let's say Val, I trust Send, I trust Brian, you know, like Steve here, David, Ben, and then it's and it actually like adds like to those who trusted you, it adds more voting power. So the more people that trust you, the higher that neuron's weighting function is. Eventually, it could be really cool if we actually take in the voting power of the individual users that trust you. So like if some like a high trusted user trusts you, that gives you more power, but we haven't gone that complex yet. As you can kind of see, yeah, it's like a big trust graph indeed.
Cool, yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, like it just yeah, so it gets kind of, you can go as complicated as you want it to, basically. Right now, like we have a relatively simple interpretation of the Neural Quorum Governance.
Eugene's question, I feel like, is a perfect next question, because it speaks to it does, like, of course the system does have a lot of possibilities. Like it seems to open up and experiment and play with a lot of different types of modular governance, you know, experiments, but in the sense that it's all encompassing, like it can be a little complex, and even just in this presentation has been hard to navigate. So Eugene's question around like how, let's see, I want to word it how has the experience been sharing Neural Quorum Governance with the community? It's a really interesting idea. But when I've shared it with other folks, the consistent feedback I get is that it's too complicated. Have you found easier ways of presenting this to community members and other operators to get more folks using the mechanism?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, and because like it's such a like, I guess like all encompassing, like you said, like there's literally like so many ways that you can kind of configure how you want that system to look like. It's a modular structure, and there's a way of like weighting functions that are relatively like customizable. And then there's this like idea that you delegate to a group of people instead of just one person, right? I think in terms of like as we have been like working with our community, they have been finding it. I mean, I think neural governance is one of the more complex ones, right? Because it actually is very community specific. And so these types of mechanisms, like the reputation types of mechanisms, will always have a harder time of onboarding, because not only like there is some way, you know, there's a number of different factors that can potentially influence your voting power. There's also those factors individually are weighted, and they can even be weighted differently depending on like how the attribution graph is. And so that like obviously like can mimic, you know, a little bit of like how you actually, you know, determine reputation for a particular person or for many different types of people or an entity. But then like consequently, like brain's kind of complicated, right? So like trying to mimic that, like similarly, like these systems are relatively complicated. I think in terms of like, you know, like receptance to the community, it has been interesting. I think like in terms of like how to like better do this in the future, it's like doing a lot of simulations and really like explaining well, it's like, well, how does this actually affect your voting power? Like, and how can you effectively like also like add your voting power? But so that's on the neural governance side. Now, I think in terms like when we think about a quorum delegation, I think that system actually has like a pretty a good actually set up to get more onboarded within the wider kind of Web3 ecosystem. And that's what I'm also like trying to like do in the next few months, maybe even like early next year. Since essentially like it's a system that doesn't actually, I mean, delegate like your voting power to someone else, but it delegates to the consensus of a group that you chose, right? Which works quite interestingly in a way that then it, you know, as I mentioned, it protects against a number of different things. But that's like, it's a bit of a different and that system to think about in terms of delegation, but can effectively be adopted in any type of community that uses any type of delegation system. So yeah, I hope that like answered your question a bit in terms of receptiveness and kind of future implementation of explaining the systems.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up. I want to give Brian's question a chance and then I want to follow up as well. But Brian says, is there an iterative way of adopting such a system? What would the smallest change to a typical public voting system look like to step in this direction? I'm thinking about ways of adopting as little risk as possible from complexity.
Yeah, I think then a good next step could also be, I mean, if you want to like actually divide both, because a neural quorum governance is a juxtaposition of neural governance and quorum delegation. So you could choose like if you wanted to add like reputation based, like even like a, you know, let's say you still use direct governance, or you still use like, oh, everyone can, there's no delegative component here, but we will choose to actually take in someone's, I mean, even if you currently have a token holding system, you can add that as a neuron in, and then you can weight it with, let's say, well, maybe I want to actually weigh in voting history. And so like making the system, the neurons relatively simple, making them being able to measure pretty much against like any type of on-chain activity or any other type of activity that you can easily measure could be a great way to get started, and trying to see like, well, I mean, obviously, if that is something that your ecosystem desires, if that you want to actually be a bit more inclusive, or put in different types of features and have them influence the initial voting power, and see what it does, right? I think the second, if you're more like, oh, actually, like I, want to keep my voting power pretty much in terms of like token holdings, because I believe that reflects the community sentiment. Another way of doing, but I want to like experiment with different types of delegation, then you could try to see like, well, actually, could I include a system such as quorum delegation that, instead of delegating, it takes actually the consensus of the delegated votes. So, but yeah, in any case, I will, in the next few months, I would love to like collaborate with people as well, if they're interested in kind of like contributing, or like saying like, hey, actually, I might be interested in having this system being added, or like at least part of the systems, or like at least like something that might, sound like relatively similar. Happy to like support as well. I mean, what I'm trying to really do, I mean, in terms of like I also foster some of the adoption, is to create tooling that is just even just like spreadsheets, even things that aren't off chain, that people can try with, that people can experiment with, to be able to like at least like simulate, well, what would the results be if we do A, like, or like our current situation, and what would it actually look like if we implemented B or C. So yeah, I definitely like I see the issues as well, as we have been trying to like focus on even implementing it just in the Stellar Community Fund. So that has been the idea so far, like trying to see, like, validate that this mechanism even works within the Stellar Community Fund. The quorum delegation delegate panels will be really interesting. So like, I think like that's just something that I want to share about more later on, once we actually implement it and try it and see the results of those. But then after that, I'm like, okay, like how can we actually find more adoption? So right now it's more like, hey, cool research, still a bit complex to adopt it, TLDR, but finding ways to simplify and adding tooling and resources accordingly.
Totally.
Hope that answered the question a bit.
Yeah, and as you know, I mean, I think like Steve has done a simulation during a community call. Like definitely, if you wanted to do something like that, and we could help you as a community get together a group to run some kind of simulation, that worked well in the past.
And Steve also wants to use your thing that starts with a C to do simulations of his thing on your
it's not mine, it's BlockScience's, it's called
yeah, whatever that is. Yeah. It was a little much. It was going by a little fast, so.
I also just shared the link in case anyone wants to look back. Yeah, CatCat has been really interesting. I mean, I definitely, it's the more customizable a system could be, right? Then it then in turn introduces a lot more complexity. So yes, but I think like, and I think also like let me see, there were some folks here from BlockScience here who could definitely help. I mean, also like we have like many folks from BlockScience in the Metagov chat who'd be happy to like also introduce. Yeah, I'm working also with Jacob a lot, and I'm just like blanking out on his name. Like, anyway, I'll find you the name very soon, and there's many folks in the Metagov Slack that can support. Zargam, yeah. Oh my God, how can I forget? Yeah, of course.
Cool. Yeah, this is great, and definitely let's do another simulation soon in a community call. That would be really fun. I saw a question I wanted to give. Mel? Yeah, Mel, you had a comment back on Brian's question. Did you want to ask anything or bring up any points?
No, I just want I'll double tap on that though. I think that that trust graph is incredible. Getting participants to engage in that kind of activity gets you to a place where you can use that data, I think, in really beneficial ways. And we've talked at length. I don't know if you're going to the multi-gov event tonight. There's like so much going on with Tally and all the Metagov, Tally, all the organizations that support. But yeah, I think a big aspect of what I've been working on relates to a trust graph and very directly using that as a delegation mechanism, and very explicitly. And I think that kind of where my mind went is almost a neuron that would essentially look in on itself, right? And say, okay, in a vote process, what are the people that I trust doing if I don't think I know the answer? And so I think that that feature, as I see it, would be really cool, because it takes somewhat of the mechanized process out of it. It's really very P2P in a way that I think is very smart. And so yeah, kudos on getting to that trust graph, because I think that's getting anybody to engage in a process of self-sortition is a bit tricky. But I think now that you have it, it's really powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, I am actually going to the event. I wasn't sure how long I was gonna stay because I have some other things too. But yeah, I mean, like in terms of like the possibilities are really endless, right? If you have like infinite, I guess, engineering power and time and resources, there's a lot that you can do. Which I would love to have, by the way. In terms of like the trust graph, like I mean, we decided to be like separate also from the delegation, because you might trust someone like, and this was actually a reasoning of like, how can we design certain systems that are a little bit more able to onboard newer users rather than kind of close off like a community of like highly, I guess, informed people, and then I guess making it impossible for newer users to kind of come on board. And so the trust graph was really like, the trust neuron was really meant for someone to say like, well, like see some new people on Discord, they look kind of like they're doing some good stuff, right? I kind of want them to friend them or like them or give them some kind of credit. I wouldn't like delegate my votes to them yet, but I definitely want to see them succeed, right? And so that's the idea of like that someone can actually build up their trust graph. And then in that form, then also build up reputation. And if you then combine that with something like, I guess like if like, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, like a highly trusted user then trusts you, then you can actually like get like a lot higher voting power. But then subsequently, let's say like if you were to like lose, let's say like if you give certain or like expose like certain like behavior like that is, I guess, like against like the best interest of the community in, let's say, the Discord or any other online platforms, people can be like, hey, I don't trust this person anymore, I will untrust him, right? And let's say if you have like an interesting voter attribution curve that then is like logistical, that actually like if like like a certain amount of people in a short amount of time were to like untrust you, you can significantly like lower, let's say, your total voting power. So anyway, I could go on about these things, as you can see, but that's the idea, right? Because then you have like somewhat of an automated process for reputation-based governance that doesn't require, any token holdings or the like. But yeah, let's continue the conversation tonight.
Yeah, and please, we'll start a thread in the Metagov Slack too for continued discussion. We might not get to all these questions and points, but we'll open up a thread so we can continue there. And please share the link to whatever the event is you're going to tonight so we can add it to our calendars for us. Not as plugged into Web3 space, but it does sound like an interesting event. So please share that. But with only 3 minutes left, I want to, Mel, you had another question around best IRL use cases. meaning non-Web3 orgs. I'm really curious, Anke. Yeah, if you see opportunities. I know you live in New York. I live in New York. New York has started doing participatory budgeting experimentation, and I'm curious, yeah, what you see there. Like, where can we bring this outside of the Web3 space?
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, like pretty much anywhere, right? Because like I said, like you can like we actually have like a hybrid like on-chain or off-chain addition into like neurons, but actually like these kind of systems you could transfer also to things like community, like local community projects, like or like even like that's where members can actually rise to the top based on reputation rather than I guess like maybe appointed or yeah, kind of, or like just like normal delegation, right? And especially as like you can then also build contribution kind of models or incentive models to these like reputation points. So let's say if someone can get a lot of reputation points for, I mean, getting out. I mean, there's actually, who was on the call today? I forgot the name. Okay, he left. Great. But they're building some, so like a system that is, well, somewhat also similar based on reputation on Slack, where like a community of people like living in the same house, they can do tasks and then actually get a kind of a score based on that, right? And so like you could also use Neural Quorum Governance for that, where you can actually add like, yes, exactly. I just like keep like, forgetting things as I talk, but yes, exactly. So, you can get different, like, I guess, like based on your contribution history, based on your like expertise, based on your, you can configure like who does certain roles, like how people, Daniel, Kronovich, yes, I met him several times, and yes, I just keep forgetting people. But yeah. So yeah, just trying to like actually like measure those scores, right? And measure that reputation and measure that contribution history, and then then rewarding that with either like roles or maybe even like monetary incentives. And so yeah, I would love to see. I guess like maybe I will do that after my work at Stellar, trying to see like how I can actually make those systems a lot more efficient to help the real world, right? Yeah. But yeah, let's see. If anyone's ever interested in doing anything collaborative, I'm happy to also like support. Very interested in these systems and yeah, wanting to make systems more impactful and efficient and inclusive, so more people can participate. Thank you.
Awesome. What a rich presentation, discussion, so much here. Yanis, I'm going to kick off our thread with your question that we didn't get to, but I really love. So come to the Metagov seminar channel on Slack and let's continue discussions there. Thank you, Anke, for your presentation. Everyone, please unmute, give our speaker a big round of applause, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you, Anke.
Bye, have a good one.
Thanks, y'all. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.